Hello everyone, I have a huge video lined up today, including two big reviews of the major shows that happened this weekend. This past weekend, I should say. NXT TakeOver War Games 2019 and Survivor Series 2019. But there's going to be a few other topics covered throughout this video as well, so I'm intending for this one to go really, really long. So let's see how long I go here. It'll probably, if it's under an hour, I'll be shocked, but let's go for it anyway. Before I talk about the shows themselves, I want to address something that happened last week and something that I really wanted to make sure. I didn't want to do an immediate reaction to it. I wanted to give the parties involved a chance to kind of give their say, and I wanted to see everything develop before I commented on it too quickly, and that was the situation with Jim Cornette and a certain comment that he made on NWA Power last week. This line that he said while on commentary is a joke that he had said many times before in some of his older stints in, Jim Crockett Promotions, WCW, WWE, all that other stuff. Somebody even posted, and Cornette mentioned this on his podcast, somebody found a clip of a Bob Backlund match from '95 where Cornette used the exact same joke. And the joke was, in regards to Trevor Murdoch on this case, although on his podcast, Cornette explained that he originally used the line to describe Big Bubba Rogers, Big Boss Man, one of my more favorite talents of the time period. I was always a big fan of the guy. But anyway, the line was, and I might not be getting every word exactly right, but it was something to the effect of, he's so tough he could walk across Ethiopia with fried chicken tied to his back and survive, or something to that extent. Now, people were not happy with this comment, and it caused an online shitstorm. I saw that Jim Cornette was trending on Twitter. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I did not watch the show as it premiered on YouTube. I watched it. I was planning on watching it later, but then when I saw the shitstorm unfolding, I was like, well, shit, I've got to go back and watch the show now. But by the time I got to watch it, NWA had already edited the line out of the episode. But the clip is, again, it's like you try to take something off the internet. It's like trying to take piss out of the ocean. It's just impossible. So it's, the line made it past, first of all, Cornette said the line, and then it made it past editing from Dave Lagana and everybody else involved in editing the show. So it wasn't until the online shitstorm that there were reactions to it. I think Dave Lagana released a statement and NWA released a statement. And ultimately, Jim Cornette resigned from NWA and will no longer be a commentator on NWA Power. He might be on this week's episode that's debuting Tuesday night. I'm not sure. We'll see. I don't know how far they taped in advance, so I don't really know. But in any case, Jim Cornette is no longer a part of NWA Power. It's another wrestling promotion that Jim Cornette has been unceremoniously let go from. And another bridge burned, shall we say. Now, what's my take on all of this and what's going on? Again, it kind of ties into what I was saying about Jordan Miles, where, the interpretation of his shirt being racist. Personally, I guess I can kind of see it, but I think it's like, maybe. But that, to me, that was a case of, that's something that could have been handled backstage without having an online blow up on Twitter, and reacting as strongly and as crazily as he did and went as far to call Jay Lethal and Uncle Tom. It's like, okay, now you're just going for non sequiturs. You're just going crazy. And just because you felt like there was some kind of racist statement being made with a t-shirt that was designed, when I felt like that's something that you could handle like professionals and like grown adults behind the scenes. And it's like, hey, guys, this shirt kind of looks like this. Could you pull it and maybe can we tweak it a little bit so it doesn't look like that? And granted, I agree with him that the shirt looks awful, but that's a dumb-looking shirt and I wouldn't be caught dead wearing it. But any, racial problems he had with it, I would have brought that up before the shirt was released. And according to Triple H, he approved the shirt, but I don't know, it may not have been on black when he approved it, and but then 90% of all wrestling shirts are on black, so who knows? I mean, I don't know. It was kind of a fiasco. Basically, my point is, Jordan Miles, if he had a grievance of some kind, he handled it in the completely wrong way. And now he's been let go by WWE. And he's basically made himself unhireable. I'm dude, anybody, all the companies, MLW, Impact, AEW, all of them, it's like, dude, you don't want to touch that dude with a 10-foot pole because he's just going to be a problem. And that's the reputation that he's kind of carved for himself when it's just a bad reaction to something that he interpreted as racist. Now, going back to the Cornette thing, the joke itself is not good. I don't think it's a funny joke. I don't think it's a good joke. When I heard it, and I don't remember him using it previously, and apparently he's been using it for 30 years, but I don't remember him using it previously, but I was like, that's a kind of a dumb joke, kind of a, a lot of stretch. And really a lot of people said the use of fried chicken is what made it especially racist, obviously referencing starvation in Ethiopia, but then saying that black people flock to fried chicken, which I've never understood that stereotype, because unless you're vegan or vegetarian, I don't know a single human being that doesn't like fried chicken. I ate fried chicken my last 2 cheat days, and back in my youth when I was a fat child, I would eat fried chicken at least twice a week because I was an unhealthy fat child, but it certainly had nothing to do with me being black. It was, that's a weird stereotype to me. Somebody was telling me once, I made a crack about like, oh, he's drinking the Kool-Aid, and somebody said, you shouldn't say that. And I'm like, what do you mean I shouldn't say that? And it's like, well, that's racist. I'm like, you're going to have to explain that one to me. How is Kool-Aid racist? And it's like, well, black people drink Kool-Aid. I'm like, everybody under the age of 10 drinks Kool-Aid. You're going to have to do better than that. But apparently Kool-Aid is a black people thing that I was not aware of. And it's like, well, I drank Kool-Aid throughout my entire childhood, so that's a new one on me. I'd never heard that one, that black people apparently are the only ones that drink Kool-Aid. Again, I drank it all the time when I was a kid, and as I grew up, I was like, oh, this is just, colored sugar water. It's like, I can drink healthier things than this. Stick to water. That's the best way to go. Ditch soda, ditch those sugar water juices, stick to water, you'll be good. But anyway. So the line, I wasn't offended by the line. I can see how people can kind of take it the wrong way. But again, to me, it's the online reaction to it, which I felt was an overreaction. To me, this is something that could have been addressed as, oh, hey, Jim Cornette said something a little off color, and maybe just, maybe Cornette could have apologized, and then that should have been the end of it. And then it's like, all right, I'll try not to make another joke like that again, or whatever. Because, he's an old-fashioned guy, and he's, using, because even his explanation on the podcast, he said, well, this is a joke I cooked up 30 years ago, back when everybody was making Ethiopia jokes. It's like, well, making starvation jokes about Ethiopia, from a context of 30 years ago, it doesn't really translate to today. So, always update your material. But again, it turned into that whole like, oh my God, Jim Cornette's a fucking racist, and if you don't agree with, if you don't agree, unfollow me on Twitter, and he should be fired from NWA, and blah 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 blah, and all this other stuff, and it just turned into like, I felt like a mountain out of a molehill over a line that is interpreted as racist and not Cornette deliberately trying to offend people. And it's been pointed out, he said it, nobody said anything after he said it. And then as the show was being edited, nobody said anything, and nobody took it out of the show. It wasn't until the online shitstorm happened. And I've said this before, I know, on videos, and I don't like to get political. I really don't. But I hate political correctness with a fucking passion. It's one of those things that it's a perfect example of the pathway to hell being paved with good intentions, where it starts with good intentions of, hey, let's be polite to everybody, and hey, let's not be mean or say really nasty, vile things about people of different races, creeds, religions, sexual orientations, all that other stuff. It comes from a very basic good place of let's be nice to each other, but it has evolved into and turned into, hey, if you say the wrong thing, you should be unpersoned. And if you say the wrong thing, you need to be doxxed. You need to be hung up by your shoelaces and hung upside down by a tree. You need to be flagellated and marched down the streets naked while people ring a bell and yell shame at you. It's turned into the modern day cyberspace equivalent of a witch hunt. It's like people are looking for a reason to get upset. They're looking to get offended. And they find any little nugget of offense that they can find in anything, and they just fly off the handle, and it's the whole cancel culture thing. It's like, if you say one thing offensive, if you step a toe out of line once, you need to go. And I don't agree with that. I don't subscribe to that. I think people make mistakes. I think people deserve second chances. I believe, now granted, Cornette, he's a guy who's burned so many bridges. It's like, but of all the things he's done to burn bridges with other companies, feels like small potatoes compared to some of the other shit he's done. But trying to start a fight with with Santino Marella at a con. That's not a good way to handle business. But again, it's just indicative of the times where, it happened to Roseanne Barr, it happened to James Gunn, it happened to, it feels like it happens every day where somebody said something and they got to go away and they got to, and this is the example I always use, and I don't mean to get too personal here, but the example I always go back to is Bill Maher on his old show, Politically Incorrect, I believe it was called, very appropriately named show. And again, I don't like to get too personal here, but in my own personal life, I had a brother with Down syndrome. He passed away back in 2011. Actually, those of you who've been following my channel since 2011, there was a period where I took a month off from making videos. That's why, because my brother passed away, and I didn't want to go and do it at the time. I was too upset, and I was using my videos back then as a way to kind of like, after I took my break, I was like, I need to like cope. And so that was like a coping mechanism to deal with losing my brother. And, but back when I was 12 years old, I watched Bill Maher's show, he made a comment about how, quote, retarded children are like dogs, or that's not a direct quote. It was something like, he seemed upset that parents of, mentally disabled or physically disabled children, it's like, oh, they get called heroes, and yet I raise two dogs, which are basically the same thing. Basically, he said retarded children are like dogs. And that comment didn't sit too well with me. You can see, because the clip's on YouTube. I'm sure it's on, because I found it again on YouTube. So if you don't believe me, go out and look for it yourself. But maybe I'll link it in the description just so I don't sound crazy. But the people on the panel were clearly uncomfortable with this line of discussion. And I found it to be offensive because it's like, dude, my brother's not a dog. How dare you? My brother's one of the best people I've ever known. Probably the best person I've ever known. How dare you call my brother a dog? You son of a bitch. And now, if I were to apply today's line of thinking to back then, that would have been like late 90s, I believe. And I'm sure there were petitions going around that Bill Maher should apologize and Bill Maher should be taken off the air. I think Bill Maher did apologize like the next week on his show, but I mean, he's not sorry. Like I don't want an apology. I know he doesn't mean it, but if that were to happen today, like it would break the internet and people would be calling for Bill Maher's head on a plate. I would be one of the ones, even though he offended me. I would be one of the ones saying, no, he should not be canceled. No, he should not be pulled off the air. And no, he shouldn't suffer. I mean, if he wants to apologize, that's fine, but I'm not going to sit here and wait for one. And I don't need one. It's like, because the way our country works, I'm speaking clearly about the United States here. I've always felt like, look, I'm willing to get offended once in a while to preserve the First Amendment. Because the people that are offending me, their rights are the same as my rights, and if their rights get taken away, then so do mine. So I always keep that in mind. I mean, South Park is a great example where they make fun of everybody, and they've done, retarded children jokes and use the R word, or at least they used to. I don't know if they still do, but they would throw the R word around quite liberally. I would be wildly hypocritical if I laughed at everything else that South Park does and defended them and everything they did, but then said, oh, but you can't go there. You can't go there. That's uncharted territory. You can't go there because that offends me. It's like, no, that's not how this works. So yeah, that's the way I've always felt. That's the way I've felt most of my adult life, where I don't need to have my feelings protected, and I don't need to have people get deplatformed just to appease me and just so I'm comfortable. Because honestly, it doesn't make me comfortable, because I don't like the idea of me having that much power over people where I can get them deplatformed. That's like something I don't want. And, I like the arrangement that I have with Bill Maher. I get to call him a prick, and I get to explain why I think he's a prick. And it's like, if he wants to stay on TV and be a prick, and he's, his rights aren't infringed upon, and he can exercise his freedom of speech, I'm happy with that. And as long as I get to, respond to him and call him a prick, I'm okay with that. I can call him a prick, a bastard, a son of a bitch, and suffer no ill consequences. I'm happy with that arrangement. That works for me, and I'm sure Bill Maher would agree with me. So yeah, the overreaction, I think that's really the main thing of the story that's really got me, where everybody just kind of flew off the handle and wanted Cornette deplatformed without even giving him a chance to apologize. And I would even argue a lot of these hypersensitive PC types, it's like, dude, an apology is never good enough. It's never good enough. You can sit down and genuflect and, and do everything you possibly could to beg forgiveness, and it's never going to be good enough. So, Cornette pretty much said on his podcast I have no intention of apologizing. The joke was not intended to be racist. Let me explain to you why it wasn't intended to be racist. And it's like, okay, I can respect that perspective, but, that's, the situation was going to play out the way it was going to play out. Once people get offended, something has to be done. Again, even though, and I'm going to stick up for Cornette a little bit here, it's like, look, he said the line, no one corrected him. No one told him not to say something like that ever again in production. And in editing, nobody caught the line and edited it out. So it's like, Cornette's not the only one at fault here for offending people. And like I said, people get offended at the drop of a hat anyway, so it's really hard to, you're walking, we as a society, we've just decided to walk on eggshells constantly, and that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, stuff like this seems to be the norm now. But again, it's one of the reasons why, entertainment, we have more options now than ever for entertainment, and so much of it is garbage because you're not allowed to go the extra mile. You're not allowed to be that offensive. Everything has to be in the safe little box, and you can't step outside that box, and if you do, you get ripped to shreds. And I'm the type of guy with any kind of expression of art. It's like, dude, just let chaos reign. Just let chaos reign. Freedom of expression. Let anything happen that can happen, and if people are offended by it, they don't have to watch it. I'm not so crazy that, and this has turned into a bigger thing than just like a YouTube wrestling show, but and again, I do enjoy NWA Power. It's simple, retro, and fun, and I like simple, retro, and fun. It's one of those great like different expressions of the wrestling art form that I find entertaining. But it's I'm not so narcissistic that I expect every piece of media that comes out, and I do think it is a little narcissistic to expect every piece of media to come out to fit your sensibilities. It's like Joker recently came out, and there was the online hysteria that it was a white, incel, alt-right, anti-woman movie, and then I watched it, I'm like, you fuckers are so, like, blowing this out of proportion, it's not even funny, but people wanted it pulled from theaters, and people raised a shitstorm online. It's like, or you could just not go see it. I don't see what the big deal is. Like, you can say why you don't want to see it and then just not see it. I don't understand why you feel the need to have it like censored or protest it in any way, shape, or form, which sounds so silly. You protest the fucking clown movie. I'm like, congratulations, this is what you're doing with your life. But political correctness sucks. I hate it. It's, again, I'm not saying people can't be offended by Cornette's joke. I'm just saying there's a better way to handle it than, screaming from the mountaintop and asking for someone to lose their job and trying to organize protests over a joke that you took offense from. And it wasn't even like, I don't know. But again, I hate political correctness. So I'm the type of guy that's like always exercises like, y'all need to calm down. You just need to calm down. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, now that we got the uncomfortable stuff out of the way, let's get into the fun stuff. Mainly the two shows that happened this weekend. Both from WWE. We had NXT TakeOver War Games, and we had Survivor Series 2019, which was the culmination of the big inter-brand war that they had going between Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. Something that I've said in the past I've never really cared all that much about whenever they do an inter-brand war or invasion or whatever. I was talking to a friend of mine about it just last night, and he said, it's like, yeah, but it's all WWE, so who cares? Which I guess there's a little bit more to it than that, especially I do feel like NXT has carved its own identity for itself, but I've already stated my issues with it, where you have too many situations where, especially on NXT, where you have all these interwoven storylines and all these personal issues, And then you get to the shows that they appear on where they're invading Raw, SmackDown, and Survivor Series, and they're all united and they're all buddy-buddy. And I'm like, are we supposed to forget that they just went to war? They literally went to war just the night before, and now they're on the same goddamn Survivor Series team? Stuff like that that really bothers me whenever I see angles like this. I've mentioned before, I've been watching old Nitros, and one of the first things they were doing in the early Nitros was building up to Starrcade, Starrcade 95, which was the big WCW versus New Japan show. And it was almost like they couldn't decide. It's like, okay, do we have WCW as a united front against New Japan in this World Cup-esque scenario, or do we just kind of not hype up the interbrand war all that much and keep all the personal stories going? And sure enough, by the time Starrcade rolled around, they were pretty much the New Japan stuff really isn't that important. And that's really the crux of the pay-per-view, is that whole thing. So they did a kind of sort of invasion angle that didn't really amount to much. It was just kind of like, oh, hey, here's this thing we're doing. But yeah, Hogan and Flair and Savage, they all still hate each other, so there's that. But so yeah, whenever you do an angle like that, it's really tough to pull off without sacrificing the individual stories or making the larger invasion feel like a gimmick. And that's kind of how this played out. Somebody said online, I forget who it was, said that there was a chance that NXT TakeOver War Games and Survivor Series could be the greatest two-night wrestling event in the history of WWE. That did not happen. I will say that right now. That did not happen. Not even close. Now, starting with NXT TakeOver War Games, I did enjoy the show. I thought it was a good, once again, another really good takeover. I don't think they've had a takeover go beneath, I think I've reviewed just about all of them, except for the original Arrival. I've reviewed all of them as part of this channel, and I don't think I've given it a grade lower than a B. They're more often than not, they're A's. I mean, TakeOver is known for their consistency and their quality. But yeah, let's get into the actual card. Like I said, I did enjoy this show. Was it a runaway home run like some other takeovers? Not really, but there was some really good stuff on there. And I'll highlight the good stuff for sure. There was a pre-show match, Angel Garza defeating Isaiah Scott. I did not see the pre-show to either show because... Yeah, I didn't see this show live as it was happening because I was over at the folks' house helping them out with something, and we had a pizza dinner, and we decided to watch the Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special. And then when I got home, the show was already halfway in progress, so I said, fuck it, I'll plug in my Super Nintendo Classic, and I played Link to the Past again. And did I beat it that night, or did I beat it the next morning? Because I was already halfway through it at that point. Either way, I got to play through Link to the Past again, which is great. It's one of the best video games of all time. But I did not watch it live, and I do not regret my decisions to do that, because Pee-wee's Christmas Special is awesome, and Link to the Past is awesome. But I did watch it the next morning, and thank God it's only 2.5 hours long. Takeovers, they've really found that sweet spot where it's 2.5 to 3 hours, typically shorter than that, and it's a nice thing to be. It's not overly long, it's not cumbersome. It's quick and easy, and it's over before you know it, and I'm totally okay with that. I don't need a show to be 5 hours long. And even Survivor Series was okay, they kept it to 3.5. That's more tolerable, and it was wrapped up by 10:30, so good for that. They didn't keep us too long. They started early, ended earlier than normal. I was, I'm okay with that. I was completely okay with that. But getting into the specifics of NXT TakeOver, once again, the War Games setup with the 2 rings, that will never not look awesome. I loved it in the old WCW shows and the Jim Crockett shows when they would do it, and I loved it here. The 2-ring setup just looks awesome. It gives the show a different look, adds to the presentation. Might be a little awkward for the non-War Games matches, because it's you got this whole other ring here that they can't use, but, it makes the show overall look cool. I'm not a huge fan of them having all the participants in a cage up on the ramp. That seems like another example of WWE overproduction, where it's just you don't really need the cage. But to the credit of the women's match, the cage did become a semi-important factor at one point. But to me, it's I kind of like having the surprise of not knowing who's coming out next, or not seeing them until they come out. And the 4th member of Team Ciampa, I mean, he wasn't even in the cage. They saved him all the way to the end till he entered. So it was all right, so the cage is just pointless, basically. Okay. But in any case, I said in my preview, I'm not a huge fan of doing 2 War Games matches on one show. I think it's a tough gimmick to do annually, even doing it annually. And I said this back when NXT did the first War Games. After a while, they all kind of look the same. You see a lot of the same tropes and a lot of the same guys involved, and it becomes a little cumbersome. But when you do 2 of them, you're basically stuck with the same exact match 2 times, and it's like, oh my god, that's not good. That's not good at all. I mean, both matches, the heels had the man advantage. In the War Games match, and actually the women's match, and I'll talk about this, but the women's match, they had an opportunity with the way everything played out where the faces could have had the man advantage, and they would have found a way to get around that. But the heels almost, and it doesn't matter how you set it up, whether it's a coin flip or ladder matches like NXT did this year, or best of 3 series. I think TNA, when they were doing Lethal Lockdown, they did like a best of 3 series with the winner getting the man advantage or something like that. But it doesn't matter how you set it up. The heel always gets the man advantage. It's just how it is, because otherwise the match doesn't really make sense. I think I can recall one time in all the War Games matches I've watched where the heels didn't have the man advantage. And so that's where the repetitive nature of it comes in, which is why I feel like War Games should be a match that you use when you feel like you need it, not as a, hey, it's that time of year, let's do a War Games match. Kind of like, I feel the same way about Hell in a Cell, and I kind of feel the same way about Elimination Chamber, although the format of that one, it's kind of like a Royal Rumble inside of a cage, so it's kind of like, yeah, that one kind of makes sense, and it could play into WrestleMania a little bit. So, okay, maybe that one's not so bad. I wouldn't do 2 Elimination Chambers on one show like they're prone to doing. But, so yeah, not a fan of doing 2 War Games matches, and I guess I'll start with the opening War Games match, which was Team Rhea Ripley, made up of Rhea Ripley, Candice LeRae, Tegan Nox, and Dakota Kai, defeating Team Baszler, captained by Shayna Baszler, with teammates Bianca Belair, Io Shirai, and Kaylee Ray, the NXT UK champion, who I'd never seen before, so this is my first time seeing her. I'm going to get in trouble. I did not like this match. I didn't like it. And I know I'm going to catch shit for saying it, but it's really my big problem with it. And I guess I'll talk about what I was referring to earlier, where it's like, this is the match where the faces could have had the man advantage and it could have worked. Because they did the Dakota Kai heel turn where she came out, she attacked Tegan Nox and re-injured her, basically eliminating 2 members from the team and leaving Rhea Ripley's team at a 4-2 disadvantage. So you could have done the man advantage with Team Rhea Ripley and then have it blow up in their face when half the team is taken out. So that was good. I liked the Dakota Kai heel turn. You could kind of see it coming, but it's like, yeah, she was rejected. She was put in as an understudy because Mia Yim got injured, and she doesn't like playing second fiddle. It's like, okay, so you kind of got it as it happened, and now you have a set feud between her and Tegan Nox. So that part of it was good. What I didn't like was when it came down to the 4-2 disadvantage, and the match just dragged, and I was like, guys, this match should be over now. Like, it's 4-2. And it's not like one of the 2 has like an Andre the Giant or a Big Show to really offset things. It's not like there's a huge size advantage on the other side there. It's just kind of like, I really feel like this match should be over now. I call back to 97 Fall Brawl where Kurt Hennig turned on the Horsemen, leaving them at a 5-on-3 disadvantage. And the Horsemen pretty much got destroyed. After that, I'm like, yeah, that's what should happen when something like that takes place. And 96, the year before, Sting came in, Stinger splashed the fuck out of the NWO and then walked out and said, huh, see, y'all didn't believe me. Screw you guys. I'm going home. And the disadvantage caught up to them, NWO won. I think if you're down 4-2 in a War Games match, which is a no DQ free-for-all, Survivor Series, you can get away with it because, disqualifications, countouts, there are ways to kind of, there are rules in place to kind of ease your way out of a disadvantage like that. But with War Games, it's supposed to be a fucking no DQ free-for-all. And I was like, all right, so the heels are going to win, right? They kind of have to at this point. Otherwise, they look like idiots. Sure enough, Rhea Ripley, she made Shayna tap, I think. And I was like, what? This is stupid. That's so stupid. And what I thought they were going to do, if Rhea Ripley's team is going to win, what I thought they were going to do was have like a breakdown on Shayna Baszler's team where they start disagreeing with each other. Because one of my things with these War Games matches, I know why Shafir and Duke were not put in this match, because they're green as goose shit, and they wanted to have the best chance of this match being good in there, which is why like Io Shirai and Bianca Belair and Kaylee Ray were the considerations for going in, rather than Shayna Baszler's two best friends. Now, to me, storyline-wise, it would make way more sense if she would just pick her two best friends to go in with her, because you can trust them. But I thought, okay, you've got Io Shirai, who is a loner. You've got Bianca Belair, who is an egomaniac. I do things my way, fuck you. Both of them have challenged Shayna in the past. I felt like, okay, if Rhea Ripley's team is going to have any chance here at this deficit, Io, Bianca, and Shayna, and even Kaylee Ray, who you could say she's the NXT UK champion playing second fiddle to the NXT US champion, and it's like, you could have like disagreements there and have a breakdown on the team, and that opens the door for the United team members left, Rhea Ripley and Candice LeRae, to do that. And I thought they were setting it up when Io Shirai did the moonsault off the top and hit Bianca on the way down. I thought we were basically going to get a Bad News Browns in Survivor Series situation where Bad News, or in this case Bianca Belair, was just going to walk out and tell her team to fuck off. I'm out of here. Screw you guys. I'm going home. That didn't happen. It just kind of like they just kind of continued, and it was almost like the 4-2 deficit almost didn't matter. It was just kind of continued as like a normal War Games match, and then Rhea Ripley's team won, which should have never happened. Like in any known universe. It's like, wow, that's like, to me, that's like a defense being allowed to have 15 men on the field and the other team is still scoring points on them. Like, it's just, or like the offense, okay, they're allowed to have 15 men on the field and the offense is only allowed to have 10, and yet somehow, some way, the offense is still scoring on them, which is just pathetic. And I get they want to make Rhea Ripley look good. She won the next night too, and they want to like promote her and make her into a star, but I don't know. I feel like there are better ways to do that than what they did, because this just kind of came off less as she won and more like Shayna's team are a bunch of idiots that couldn't finish the job. It kind of reminds me of what Punk talked about in that shoot where he defeated the Shield in a 3-on-1 match, and they were like, "But you got to make Roman look really strong." And Punk finally was like, you know what'll make him look strong? If they beat me. Because one guy beating three doesn't make anybody look good. I don't care how you book it. I mean, it makes the Shield look terrible that they couldn't beat one guy. And I agree with that. It was like, I thought it was a stupid match when they did it. I was like, why are they doing this? This is so dumb. And sure enough, they had Punk go over, which I thought was completely asinine, against like one of the toughest factions in the history of the WWE. But that's neither here nor there. But the War Games match, it wasn't the performers, and it wasn't any fault of the performers. It was the story that was laid out for them. I did not like the story that was told. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, that you put the baby faces down in that big of a hole, and they still come back and win it. And I'm like, that's silly. That's just, you've pushed my suspension of disbelief beyond my ability to handle it. So, A for effort, for sure. I mean, they certainly tried. It wasn't lack of effort from the girls, and it wasn't anything that they did wrong. They were just acting out a script and a story that I wasn't personally in favor of. But, so that was definitely the weaker of the two War Games matches, and I wasn't a fan of it. Sorry, but that's how I took it. Next up, we had the Triple Threat Contenders match, with the winner getting a title shot against Adam Cole the next night at Survivor Series. Ultimately, kind of a pointless match, because I never felt like Adam Cole was ever going to drop the title at Survivor Series anyway, and I knew that Pete Dunne was going to win. I was looking at this, and I'm like, there's no way that Damian Priest and Killian Dane are winning this match. There's absolutely no way, and sure enough, they didn't. But the match itself was good, and it was nice to see a triple threat match that wasn't just a straight up two guys fight, one guy comes in, breaks it up, and then they cycle in and out into a bunch of singles matches. They actually did do some really cool and creative spots in there, utilizing all three men. And all three of them brought something a little different to the table, too, which was fun. And, it was just a good, solid triple threat match. Pete Dunne got the win, as expected. I thought the finish was pretty well designed for this one, too. Pretty well done. And, done. Pun not intended. But it was, it was just a good, solid match. I enjoyed it. It was fun for what it was. And it was starting to get, it ended it just as I was ready for it to be over. Like, just as, like, the 2 counts, it was like, all right, guys, we want to think about wrapping this up. And they did. So it was like, it didn't overstay its welcome, so that's good. Overall, good, solid match. I enjoyed it. Then we got Finn Balor versus Matt Riddle. I thought it was good. I thought these two would mesh I thought these two meshing together would create something epic. And instead it was just a really good match. So I guess you could say I was a little disappointed in it, but it was 2 guys that you've never really seen work together before, having a match that probably acting out the typical WWE or NXT formula for a match. But the fact that these 2 guys are so different from each other and stylistically different from each other, and then having interactions together and having a match together, I thought it went about as well as it could, acting out like the pretty standard, typical formula match. I thought it was good. Matt Riddle, I think, I said it before, I think that guy is money. I think he's got the look, he's got the ability. I think he's really good. And Finn Balor is really interesting seeing him in an NXT environment again and on a takeover. This is his first takeover back since returning to NXT. And I thought it was a good match. Not match of the year or anything like that. Nothing, too crazy, but it was overall a really solid match between 2 guys that can get it done. And I think they can do better with each other. So I think there's room to do maybe another match where they maybe up the ante a little bit and put something a little extra on the line and do something a little bit more with them. But Finn Balor got the win. Which, yeah, they were protecting Matt Riddle really heavily early on, and now he's kind of becoming like that guy, kind of like what Tyler Breeze was, where it's like, he's not a jobber, but when it comes time to the big match, he typically loses, and it's like, you may want to give the guy a few more wins, especially, if you want to get him ready for a run on Raw or SmackDown, but we'll get to all of that when we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But overall, yeah, Finn Balor, Matt Riddle, I thought it was a good match. And then we had the closing War Games match, Team Ciampa, captained by Tommaso Ciampa, with Keith Lee, Dominik Dijakovic, and the surprise entrant Kevin Owens, making a one-night return to NXT, it sounds like. It's not a permanent thing. He's actually going to stay on Raw, but they defeated the Undisputed Era, captained by Adam Cole, with Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong. This was the better of the 2 War Games matches, for sure. I thought it was a lot more chaotic, a lot more fun. A lot crazier with some of the stuff that they did with the plunder and the tables, and that's, oh my god, that finish at the end was scary as fuck. I looked at that setup and I'm like, oh my god, Tommaso and Adam Cole could die if one thing goes wrong. This looks nasty, and fortunately they landed okay and everything's fine. But I thought the match was really fun, really enjoyable. I wouldn't put it up there as like one of my favorite War Games matches, but I think adding Kevin Owens to the mix was a nice little X factor to spice things up a little bit. I was hoping that would create a little bit more intrigue in his Survivor Series match the next night. It did not. He was kind of wasted in that match, and they didn't really make too much out of it on Raw except for maybe a Seth heel turn with AOP, but we'll see how that all plays out. But I just thought the match was a lot of fun. Really good main event. My favorite match on the show. Everybody just went crazy in there, and they really took advantage. This was of the 2 War Games matches, I felt like this one took the better advantage of the 2 ring setup. And overall, it was just a really good War Games match. Really good. Fun stuff. And like I said, I think adding Kevin Owens to the mix added a lot to it, and that spot at the end, which thank God was the finish. They come up with this crazy thing. It's like, okay, because that happens so frequently, and I'll get into it more when I talk about Survivor Series, where you have a move that should be the finish, and then it's not the finish, and then the finish we do get is kind of anticlimactic. It's like, oh, okay. But yeah, no, I thought Team Ciampa versus Undisputed Era was very good. I thought it was a really good main event to the show, and what was overall a pretty good takeover. Again, the first War Games match, not my cup of tea. I wasn't a fan of the way it was booked, but everything else on the show was at least pretty good, and the main event was the strongest thing. So good stuff all around, and I really enjoyed it. So that's my take on NXT TakeOver War Games. I thought it was a really good show. And from there, we are going to move on to Survivor Series 2019, which happened the next night. And this show I was not too high on. Again, I didn't see the pre-show, so I missed all the matches. Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode defeating the Street Profits, or last eliminating the Street Profits in a inter-brand tag team battle royal. Lio Rush defeating Akira Tozawa and Kalisto. Akira Tozawa's on Raw. Why wouldn't he be on... whatever. Why wouldn't he be on the show that has the Cruiserweight division? But Kalisto, too. Wouldn't all the Cruiserweights be on NXT just because that's where the Cruiserweight title is? But fuck it, whatever. Lio Rush successfully defended the title. And then you had the Viking Raiders defeating the New Day and the Undisputed Era, Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, formerly Red Dragon, my preferred name for that team, in a three-way between the tag team champions. So then we jump into the main card, and I gotta say, the crowd was so muted for most of the show. They were just dead, and I don't know what it was, but there was just very little life to the show. It wasn't until they came alive a little bit for Daniel Bryan, they came alive for the men's Survivor Series match, and Brock seemed a little over, and they came alive a little bit for Adam Cole and Pete Dunne, but again, there was never that, rabid response, and, at the beginning of the show, they felt it felt like a crowd that had been in the arena for 5 hours, and they were tired. It was amazing to me how little they were reacting to things, and it wasn't good. It definitely impacted the first few matches, and it definitely impacted the main event. And overall, I didn't passionately hate this show. That wasn't on par with that one Battleground where I just rage quit on WWE afterwards. The one that had the Punjabi prison match in the main event. But it wasn't a good show. It was just kind of an overcrowded, kind of poorly booked, kind of dull, lifeless mess of a show. And there were, none of the matches were as good as they could have been, I felt like. But that's just me. Let's go over them one by one. We started off with the Women's Survivor Series match. Team NXT, Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, Candice LeRae, Io Shirai, and Toni Storm defeating Team Raw, made up of Charlotte Flair, Natalya, Asuka, Kairi Sane, and Sarah Logan, and Team SmackDown, Sasha Banks, Carmella, Dana Brooke, Lacey Evans, and Nikki Cross. God, that is a lot of names. I think these Survivor Series matches, making them triple threats, made the matches a little too crowded, and there were a little too many bodies floating around. I said in my preview, I wish they had been a little bit more intricate with the matches. Instead of making every interbrand match Raw versus SmackDown versus NXT, you could have done NXT versus SmackDown and SmackDown versus Raw and Raw versus NXT in different matches. You didn't have to, just cram all three brands in every single match. But in any case, a couple things that pissed me off about this match. Number one, Team NXT is bullshit because it's... Okay, you got Rhea Ripley, who was the captain of a War Games team the night before, and Candice LeRae, who was on that team. And tonight, on this team, they are sharing this ring with Bianca Belair and Io Shirai, who were on the opposing team of the War Games match the night before. So I guess the War Games match just didn't matter, because they were in sync, and they were working together, really, really well. I'm am I supposed to forget that they all went to war just the night before? Which match matters? Please let me know which one is supposed to matter. Is it the big Interbrand match or the War Games match the night before? Because I honestly don't know. Now, to their credit, Raw and SmackDown had their own inner issues that came into play throughout the match. Mainly, in this case, Charlotte and Asuka getting into it, and Asuka blinding Charlotte with the mist, which played into Asuka defeating Charlotte the next night on Raw. But yeah, they have personal issues, and it came out in the match. Just because they're all in the same brand doesn't mean they all like each other, and doesn't mean that, their personal histories aren't going to come into play. So I like that whenever that comes up. It came up in the Men's Survivor Series match, too, between Roman Reigns and Baron Corbin. I'm yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they hate each other. They're not going to work well together, and they don't. And to me, it makes absolutely no sense that four girls who were in a War Games match just the night before on opposing teams are now, perfectly in sync with each other, and they're just acting like none of that happened. And I'm all right, so I didn't like that. The Io Shirai and Candice LeRae injuries was kind of awkward in how it played out, and wasn't a huge fan of that. Made it look like NXT cheated to win. And yeah, I wasn't a fan of this. I didn't like this. It was also overly long, and the crowd was just not interested at all, so that didn't help things either. It was just, so you have a really long match in front of a crowd that's barely reacting to anything, and a booking situation that is not ideal. So, yeah, that's kind of how I take it. So, yeah, Rhea Ripley was, well, I guess she wasn't the sole survivor because Io and Candice weren't officially eliminated, but it was she got the win for her team, so she gets to go over both nights in a row. So clearly they've got big plans for her moving forward, but we'll see what that is. Next up, we had NXT winning another match, the Battle of the Mid-Tier Champions, Roderick Strong defeating AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. God, it's so weird that, like, Roddy and AJ had the first match in Impact history, Impact on Spike, I should say, not the FS1 days, but on the first Impact match on Spike back in 2005, and here they are almost a decade and a half later, and they are, on a WWE pay-per-view, one of the big 4 pay-per-views. It's like, man, that's really weird. It's really weird. It's weird that they've come as far as they have, and it's also weird that I've been watching them for as long as I have, because it's like, it doesn't feel like it was a decade and a half ago, but Jesus Christ, it was. And, but yeah, that's about where the kind words for this match is going to stop. Again, the crowd was kind of dead for it, and I don't know what it is about AJ and Nakamura where they just don't have the chemistry in WWE, but something about them, like, because again, I keep going back to it, the match they had at Wrestle Kingdom 10 was awesome, and one of the best matches on that show. The only thing that could potentially top it in my eyes was the main event. But this match was just kind of flat to me, and again, the crowd wasn't really reacting to it. I can barely remember the spots that they did after the match was over. It was just one of those, it came and went type of matches. And, the effort was there. It wasn't like it was a terrible match, but it was just kind of like they did a bunch of moves and then it was over. And maybe it's because all 3 of them are heels. Maybe that was part of it too. It's like you have all these 3 guys that are heels and there's no real baby face in there, and you just kind of get a flat match as a result. But in any case, this match didn't really do it for me. I liked how Roderick Strong kind of stole the win in the way that he did, but other than that, it was just kind of a flat match. Then we got, for the NXT title, Adam Cole defending against Pete Dunne, who had won the triple threat the next night. The crowd started off kind of flat for this one, but they kind of came alive as they started doing more stuff, and this was the best match on the show up to this point. My big issue with it was, again, it was one of those cases where they had a perfectly set up finish with the flip pile driver on the apron. And I'm like, okay, there's your finish right there, because I know Adam Cole's winning, and there's no way Pete Dunne's winning the title here. And there's your finish right there. But it wasn't the finish, and they kept going, and then the finish they came up with was kind of flat. I'm like, you should have ended it on the first flip pile driver on the apron, either by count out or have him roll him in and pin him. Like, either one. I would have taken either one of those as a finish. And I guess the flip pile driver is just the new super kick where everybody does like 3 or 4 of them in a match and it never ends the match. And I'm just sitting there like, how did we get to this point where guys get dropped on their fucking head and it's only a 2 count every single time? That's just weird to me. But in any case, I thought the match was fine for what it was. Like I said, it was the best match up to the show on this point, but I knew Adam Cole was going to win, and the finish fell kind of flat for me after what I felt like was a perfectly well-designed finish that they had right there at their fingertips, and they didn't take it. And the first time I noticed that happening, it probably happened before this, but the first time I remember being aware of it was Cena versus Batista at SummerSlam 08, I think it was. Yeah, it was the same one with Edge and Taker, so that was 08. And good match, but you had that setup where Cena was going for a missile dropkick and Batista countered it into the Batista bomb. I'm like, oh shit, there's your finish right there. And then Cena kicked out, and I'm like, oh, I guess Cena might be going over because if he's not, that should have been the finish. And then Batista just beat him 10 seconds later with a regular Batista bomb. I'm like, why didn't you just end it on the first one? The first one was way cooler. And I get, it's like, yeah, they want to make, excuse me. They want to make Cena look strong by kicking out of a big finish, but it's like, have him kick out of the regular Batista bomb first and then do the second one, counter from the missile dropkick, if that's what you want to do, because the first one was way cooler. It was a missile dropkick counter into a power bomb. That looked way cooler. But no, couldn't do that. So yeah, that was Adam Cole successfully defended the title. Fine match. Like I said, it was the match I enjoyed the most up to this point, but granted, we're only at match number 3, but it was I had some minor issues with it that kind of took it down a little bit. Then we had The Fiend successfully defending the Universal title against Daniel Bryan. I fucking hated this. For the love of God, WWE, stop doing the red lighting for The Fiend matches. It hurts my eyes to look at it. I feel like I'm watching the match on a Virtual Boy. It It's a pain to watch. I hate it. You're killing the Fiend. And I get, and I'll talk about this when I talk about the Steve Austin Undertaker interview, but, you had this scenario where, and Undertaker talked about this, where it was like, in his early days, he was all about playing the gimmick and getting the gimmick over and being an attraction. He wasn't there to have great matches initially, even though he was capable of doing it. And that makes sense to me. That makes perfect sense. And if they want The Fiend to be that, okay, great. I'm on board with that. You want him to be like this monster gimmick that just no-sells a bunch of shit and kills people. That's great. I'm totally okay with that. Goldberg. I don't want Goldberg to have his catch can star rating match. I want him to go out there and murder people. It's great. It's what he's there for. That's what he's there for, and he plays it well. And I think The Fiend could be one of the greatest attractions in WWE, but not if you have the red lighting on. It doesn't work. Stop it. I hate it. And it's like, oh, well, they did it with Kane in his early matches. Yeah, and they stopped because it sucked and it didn't work. Especially in Kane's case, because he's wearing a red and black suit, so he just kind of gets hidden by the lights. A really dumb thing to do. Sin Cara used to have the mood lighting. Yeah, and you stopped because it didn't work. Stop doing the colored lighting. It doesn't fucking work. TNA did it a couple of times. It doesn't work. Stop it. Stop with the red lighting with The Fiend. You're killing The Fiend. It makes me not want to watch his matches because they're tough to watch, and you're making it a chore. Stop it. Get some help. But anyway, then we had the men's Survivor Series match. Team SmackDown defeating Team SmackDown defeating Team Raw and Team NXT. Team SmackDown made up of Captain Roman Reigns, Braun Strowman, King Corbin, Mustafa Ali, and Shorty G. God, I hate that name. Team Raw was captained by Seth Rollins with Drew McIntyre, Kevin Owens, Randy Orton, and Ricochet. And Team NXT was captained by Tommaso Ciampa with Damian Priest, Matt Riddle, Keith Lee, and Walter. So points for not having the guys that were on opposing teams on the War Games match also in the NXT Survivor Series match. So points for that. But my big issue with this match is that a lot of the guys that were in this thing were completely wasted. I talked about how Kevin Owens was kind of an X factor given that he worked the NXT show the night before and his loyalties were brought into question. Didn't really matter because he was just eliminated willy-nilly and it was like not a big deal was made out of it. Matt Riddle eliminated Randy Orton, and before I could even process what I was seeing, he was quickly eliminated. Walter was in there as the fifth man, and he was the first one eliminated, ultimately did nothing. Braun Strowman got unceremoniously counted out, which feels like it's becoming a tradition at this point. We'll protect him by having him get counted out, yet somehow Pete Dunne earlier in the night can take a flip pile driver on the apron, not get counted out. Braun Strowman takes a simple bump, and he gets counted out. I'm like, okay, seems legit. I'll buy it. And, but yeah, a lot of things where a lot of guys in this match just felt completely wasted. But that said, I thought the action was crazy and frenetic and energetic. And it was a fun match to watch just for the car wreck aspect of it. I like that Corbin and Roman Reigns had their disagreement that caused a little bit of an issue with the SmackDown team. And I like that Keith Lee got to have like a standout performance at the end. And I actually thought he might win it because at that point I was like, all right, NXT's winning this thing. It doesn't even matter at this point. And much was talked about online about how they had NXT win at the show just to stick it to AEW and trying to build them up and not have people view them as the third brand so that they'd be more viable on Wednesday nights. I don't know if that's going to work. Personally, I don't give a shit about the brand superiority thing anyway, so it's like I don't think any more or less of NXT after this show regardless, so it didn't really matter. It didn't really affect me, but I can't speak for everyone else. But it was nice to see Keith Lee get like a really cool performance and get to shine in there with Roman Reigns a little bit. Roman got the win, which I wasn't surprised by that at all. But overall, it was the best match on the show. And it was good, and it was crazy, and it was fun Survivor Series elimination goodness. Even though a lot of the guys involved were kind of wasted, I still thought it was a fun match. So kudos to that. You had one match on the show that I liked, so that's good. Next up, you had Brock Lesnar successfully defending the WWE title against Rey Mysterio in a no-holds-barred match. Dominic coming out at the end and doing a 619 and all that other shit was fun and goofy. and made the match at least more memorable than it would have been otherwise. But other than that, it was pretty much just typical Brock stuff. He just went out there, threw Ray around for a bit, and then beat him with an F5, and that was it. The only thing that added any flavor to the match at all was Dominic. And I can't believe I just said that. The best part of a match was Dominic. It was Dominic's involvement. Never said that sentence before. But, yeah, this was kind of like, I thought maybe this match could be really good based on the match that they'd had back in 2003 and based on the build-up to this, which I thought, personally, this was the best built-up match on the show. But, as is, it was just a typical Lesnar match with one kind of cute, goofy little thing to happen to kind of liven it up at least a little bit. So, I'm not saying it was bad, but it wasn't necessarily that good either. It was just kind of there. And, Brock's worst matches seem to be the ones where it's like, make it quick and get the fuck out of there and, just do the same Brock formula that you've seen a million times. And that's pretty much what this was. So, didn't like it, didn't hate it. It was just kind of there. And then we had the main event, Shayna Baszler defeating Becky Lynch and Bayley in the Battle of the Women's Champions. This match did not go well. Very long, very boring. This felt like a match that was at the end, based on the crowd reaction to it, this felt like the match that was tacked on at the end of a 5-hour show. And it wasn't. Like, Survivor Series did not go that long. I felt like it peaked with the men's Survivor Series match, but it wasn't like an excruciatingly long event. Granted, the crowd had to sit through the pre-show. I did not, so maybe that's the difference. But I don't know. This felt like the crowd reaction for a match that was the main event of a show that was much longer than this. But for whatever reason, they were clearly not interested in this. Nothing of intrigue happened in this match. The girls did not mesh well together at all. It was just a kind of a bumblefuck type of match. Kind of reminded me of some of Triple H's matches where it's just guys like doing moves, but they're not doing them in an exciting way. It's just kind of like stuff is happening and nothing of intrigue is taking place. It's just kind of, you're just watching something unfold and then it ends and that's it. Very flat match, very dull match, poor main event, and nothing of intrigue happened. Some people were speculating that Ronda Rousey was going to return. That did not happen. Becky just attacked Shayna after the match, continuing the WWE's tradition of having their faces be sore losers. And that was the end of that. So yeah, that was Survivor Series. I didn't hate the show. I don't think it's up there as like one of the worst shows I've seen this year. But it wasn't a good show. It was not a good show. It was kind of flat, kind of dull. And again, maybe that comes from me not liking the brand superiority stuff. I just don't really, I've never been invested in it. But I think a lot of it also has to do with the crowd, which was just strangely muted for most of the show. And I don't know what caused that. I don't know why that is. But the show turned out the way it did. It was just kind of a flat and dull show. And that's just what it was. So whoever it was online that said that there was a chance that TakeOver and Survivor Series could be the greatest two-night event in WWE history, sorry to break it to you, that didn't happen. That did not happen. But Survivor, I liked War Games, but I did not care for Survivor Series all that much. So a couple of things coming out of Survivor Series I do want to talk about. I guess I'll get the controversial stuff out of the way. Corey Graves and Mauro Ranallo had another blow up on Twitter, I guess you could say, where Corey was very critical of Mauro's commentating the night before on TakeOver, and Mauro ended up missing Survivor Series as a result, leading people to, and he deleted his Twitter as well, leading people to speculate that he had another anxiety breakdown, and all things that all the things that played out from that. I'm not going to talk too long about this because basically I think it could be summed up with Corey Graves is kind of a dick. There's no reason to be putting that on Twitter. There's no reason to be starting shit up with your coworkers. And I know they're not on the same commentary team, but they are colleagues work for the same company. And he calls him out on Twitter. Again, Twitter continues to be the worst thing that ever happened to humanity. Calls him out on Twitter and starts shit when there doesn't need to be shit. It's one of my favorite lines from Men in Black. It's Will Smith, don't start nothing, won't be nothing. So Corey looks like an asshole, but Mauro, if he had another freak out where deleted his Twitter and then didn't attend Survivor Series for whatever reason the next night, I would tell him, it's like, dude, you need, I know mental health issues. I know anxiety is a thing for a lot of people, but if you're going to be in the wrestling business, you also have to have a tougher skin, and don't let that stuff bother you. Especially when you can just chalk it up to Corey Graves as just an asshole. Like, the dude's an asshole. It's just how it is. Because this isn't the first time he's done this shit on Twitter. Again, he pulls this shit on Twitter. Like, it's like, fuck you, dude. Fuck you. But yeah, Mauro needs to get a tougher skin if he's going to be in this business. And, you're going to deal with assholes. That's just how it is. I've dealt with assholes in my day-to-day work, and I've dealt with assholes that gave me anxiety attacks. I had 2 managers in my lifetime where I was like, I swore I would never work for those people again, because I just once I got a new job and got out of there, or got a raise and got a promotion and got out from under their thumbs, I was like, I will never work for those people again, because they made me feel like stressed out motherfuckers. But I didn't do anything that negatively impacted the day-to-day operations of the business. And I feel like, if it's true that he didn't attend Survivor Series because he had another panic attack after what Corey said, it's like, dude, you need to toughen up a little bit. I need to toughen up and not let that stuff get to you. And I know that's easier said than done for a lot of people, but it's like, dude, just, if that were me, I'd just be like, oh, fuck you. Like, oh, who said that? Corey Graves? Yeah, fuck that guy. Like, that would be me. But so that's all I wanted to say about that. To me, it's almost not even worth talking about all that much. Something that is worth talking about is the interview that took place after Survivor Series. Stone Cold Steve Austin's Broken Skull sessions with The Undertaker. Out of character, and talking about his life and times in the WWE, how he got into wrestling, how he went to WWE, and some of the crazy stories that happened in there, and his opinions on various things that took place. And I'm not going to spoil anything that happened in the interview. All I'll say is, go watch this. It's great. I live for stuff like this. Shoot interviews are great because you get to see the guys kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, and you get to see who they really are and how they really felt about things. And Undertaker is probably the guy that I'm most interested in seeing shoot interviews for, because he was around for so much shit. Like the tail end of the Hogan era, through the New Generation era, the early days of the Monday Night Wars when they were getting their asses kicked, and into the Attitude Era, and into the brand split era, and into various things, to WrestleMania transforming into a permanent stadium show, and all the people that he dealt with all the way through until today. It's like, dude, I'd love to sit there and listen to Undertaker talk for like 6 hours straight about that type of stuff. And I think the interview ended up being like an hour 40, and I felt like they glossed over shit. It's like, oh, dude, they could do like 10 of these. They could turn this into a series. Like Undertaker just giving his true opinions on things. And a lot of people were shocked to hear Undertaker talk like a normal person. I wasn't too shocked by it, because I've seen it before. I saw it, because he used to do interviews when he was the American Badass. And even when he was in the Ministry of Darkness, he was doing like A&E did a biography on Mick Foley, and I think he did like normal interviews where he was out of character talking like a normal person on that. So I'd seen it before, but for a lot of people, they'd never seen it before, so they were just like, what the fuck? He talks like a normal person. What is this? But stuff like this is great. I thought the interview came off really well, and Austin and Taker, they have the feel of two guys that have just seen it all, done it all, and they were just shooting the shit the entire time. And it was very relaxed, a very interesting set of stories and opinions from Undertaker, and very enjoyable listening. I'll be honest, I enjoyed that interview more than I did War Games and Survivor Series. And I know that's probably some people will probably think I'm being mean for saying that, but that's the truth. I was just sitting there in awe the entire time watching this. It was just it was a fascinating watch. I really enjoyed it, and go check it out. I highly recommend checking it out. WWE is typically good with this type of stuff on the network, where it's guys doing interviews and kind of that pulling back the curtain and seeing behind the scenes of what goes on type of stuff. And I thought this came off really, really well, and it was cool to see Taker in this type of environment. So, good stuff. I really enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it yet, go pull up the WWE Network and watch the Broken Skull sessions with Stone Cold Steve Austin as he interviewed The Undertaker. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of those, depending on who they get. They may have peaked early with Undertaker, because that would have been my number one choice on who I would want on a show like this. So I don't know who else they would get other than that. But in any case, bring on more of these. I thought it was great. I thought it was really good, and I really enjoyed it. So that is that. So last thing I wanted to cover, if you don't want to see me geek out over Masters of the Universe, and let's pull some of this shit up. How many of these do I got? Good God. Nah. Okay. Doing this. All right. How many? I should have prepared this beforehand. How many of these did I get? Good Lord. Whoa. And that almost hit me in the head. But anyway, whatever. While I was watching NXT TakeOver, they put up an advertisement for a new toy line that Mattel is doing. The the Masters of the WWE Universe, which are hybrid WWE Masters of the Universe action figures that Mattel is developing. And these figures are actually, they're kind of precursors to the new Masters Origins line that they're doing next year, which is done in the classic Masters of the Universe style. I've got He-Man right here. And this is my show accurate version of He-Man, which is done in the classic style of the old toys, but done to look more like the TV show. But this is more the classic style, less posable, and these new toys are going to be more posable, basically. But still done like similar size, but a little bit more posability to them. And maybe a little additional details too. But before they launch the Masters Origins line, they're doing Masters of the WWE Universe, which are wrestling figures that are kind of hybrid with Masters of the Universe gimmicks and styles and toys. And I'm like, where the fuck was this when I was 6 years old? I would have loved this. And I'm seeing this more and more, actually, because I think the company that makes Funko Pops, they did their own versions of this with the Savage World. They did like DC Superheroes and Mortal Kombat and horror movie icons like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger and things like He-Manized versions of those. And they also did Thundercats versions of that, which I hated the Thundercat toys when I was a kid. So to see like He-Man style Thundercat toys, I'm like, yeah, that's what I would have wanted as a kid. Now I hear they're terrible because they're poorly made, and there's actually reports of them breaking inside of the package. It's like, oh my God, how does that happen? That's terrible. But poor craftsmanship and poor quality assurance there. But the idea is nice. But I'm seeing more and more toys done in the style of the classic Masters of the Universe action figure style. I'm like, well, they are the greatest toy line of all time. So it's like people are coming around and realizing, oh yeah, those toys are really fucking good. Let's take other properties and shape them into being He-Man style figures. And Mattel, they have the WWE license now, and it's like, fuck it, let's do WWE style He-Man toys. Why not? Or let's do WWE He-Man style WWE toys. That is the way I should say that. And I'm like, I heard that, and I'm like, tell me more, because that piqued my interest. And of course, if you follow me on Twitter, I went absolutely batshit crazy on Twitter, like posting all these ideas I had for all these toys they could have done, and reacting to the ones that have already been posted and ones that they're already set to release. And I had a ball with this. I had way more fun with this than I should have. Going over the toys themselves, what I could gather, I saw some of the ones that are going to be released initially, and I saw some of the ones that they have planned for release later on. And some of them I found very, very exciting, and some of them not so much. I saw the Castle Grayskull ring, with a Castle Grayskull themed wrestling ring. And again, where was that when I was 6 years old? I would have gotten that thing in a heartbeat. That would have been my, I would have literally been like, all right, Mom, Dad, that is my entire Christmas. Just give me like wrestling He-Man figures. That's all I want. And it would have been a blast. And that ring in particular is just amazing. Great design, and I loved it. The ring also comes with two figures. It comes with the John Cena done in kind of a He-Man style, and I'm like, okay, it's like, God, he still looks lame. With the Never Give Up shirt, he still looks stupid. Like, even with that. And Triple H, who kind of has the Skeletor Terror Claws gimmick. One of the Skeletor variant toys was the Terror Claw Skeletor with these really long nails. So they gave that to Triple H. And I'm like, and even Triple H's regular release toy is the Skull King. And it's like, they gave him Skeletor, really? I would have given it to like Bray Wyatt or Finn Balor or someone creepy. Like, not someone like Triple H, but I don't know. Maybe. I'm very protective of Skeletor. He is my favorite character. But and John Cena is He-Man. I guess that makes sense. But Not my first choice. I would have gone with He-Man, or I would have gone with Hulk Hogan as He-Man. That would have been like, dude, at like 5 years old, that would have been my favorite toy. Like a Hulk Hogan as He-Man hybrid toy. I would have lost my goddamn shit. But a couple of the other ones. The only other one I can think of I wasn't a huge fan of was the Manny Faces. And Manny Face's gimmick was that he would twist the knob on his head and it would be a different face. It was a man, a robot, and a monster. And those were the three different faces. And the one that they gave the Manny Faces gimmick to was the New Day. So it's like you flip one face, it's Kofi Kingston. One face, it's Big E Langston. And another face, it's Xavier Woods. And I was kind of like, really? They gave New Day the Manny Faces gimmick? I'm like, no. You give the Manny Faces gimmick to a guy who's had multiple gimmicks throughout his career. Mick Foley would be perfect for Manny Faces. You get a Mankind head, a Cactus Jack head, and a Dude Love head. Boom. Put me in, coach. I'm ready. New Day, I would have rather New Day been like some of the goofier hero characters. Like Kofi Kingston would have been good as Cyclone, who's the human tornado. He's like a big blue yellow guy that's the human tornado, and he spins around. I'm like, that would have been good for Kofi. Also would have been good for Kerry Von Erich back in the day. The human tornado, the Texas tornado, Actually, the Hasbro Texas tornado toy would spin around like that. So it would have been a rehash, if anything else. But, Big E Langston could have been Snout Spout. Could you imagine Big E Langston with a big robot elephant head? It would have been hilarious. And Xavier Woods could have been like Rio Blast, who's like the cowboy, the cyborg cowboy guy, or like Extendar, who's like this knight that can extend his arms and legs, or maybe he could have been Mecha Neck, who extends his neck. A couple of other things. I'm like, giving them all Manny Faces, I'm like, that feels like a waste of the Manny Face gimmick. But other than that, I kind of like all the other ones. Ultimate Warrior didn't really match up with anybody. They just kind of made an Ultimate Warrior He-Man style toy. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, because Ultimate Warrior looks like he belongs. A lot of the guys from the 80s look like they would just belong in a toy line like this. And Warrior is probably the best fit, but I would have gone with more of a Hordak motif with him. And Hordak, who I have laying around here somewhere, you'll notice this is the show-accurate Hordak toy. And he's got like all the members of the Evil Horde, the ruthless leader of the Evil Horde. That's Hordak's like subgroup of villains, and they were the main antagonists on the original She-Ra show. They all have kind of this bat motif that you'll see here, and I think that kind of matches up with the Ultimate Warrior's kind of design. So I would have gone more like that with him. I also have, where is she lying around? Shadow Weaver, yes. You'll notice she also has the bat motif as well. She's Hordak's second in command, basically. And it would have been cooler to see Ultimate Warrior done in kind of that Horde style, but as is, I think the toy looks great. The Legion of Doom and Demolition would also fit in with like kind of a Horde motif as well. Although I think Legion of Doom would also kind of work with Spikor. Spikor was a purple guy that had spikes all over his body, so I think that would also be a good one for the Road Warriors. But a couple of the other ones I saw, there's a Rey Mysterio Stratos figure that looks beautiful. I'm like, that is perfect. Stratos is the Birdman that can fly, and I think Rey Mysterio matches that figure perfectly. The Macho Man figure really made me happy. Macho Man-at-Arms, and this is the show-accurate Man-at-Arms figure, and the Macho Man toy kind of has the Man-at-Arms helmet and a little bit of the armor, but it also has a double gimmick. There was a He-Man and Skeletor variant figures called the Battle Damage, or a Battle Armor He-Man and Skeletor, where you flip the chest and the battle armor gets more and more damaged, and they gave that gimmick to Macho Man as well. And that figure looks really good. Sting was kind of a weird one. They gave him Clawful, which at first I was like, oh, that's an odd one. Clawful is the crab man with a huge, like, giant red claw. And I was like, that's an odd one for Sting. But then I thought about it. Oh, Scorpion, claw. I was like, okay, I kind of see it. I probably would have gone more for Whiplash, who has the big tail. And, Sting, tail, I would have gone more for that. But the figure looks cool. I wish they had painted the claw black to better match the Sting outfit. But overall, it's cool to see that gimmick on Sting anyway. So I was cool with that. And I was looking at some of the artwork for some of the ones that they're releasing later. There's an awesome looking Rock figure that looks like it's kind of it's Rock with elements of both He-Man and King Randor. He looks like he has King Randor's weapon. And I'm like, that looks really cool. And Rock fits this perfectly. And You have Beastman. Finn Balor's going to be a Beastman toy, and so is Braun Strowman. And Beastman, who's this guy, Braun Strowman fits this so perfectly, it almost hurts, like how much he fits. It's like, it's so good, I can't believe I didn't think of it. That's how good it looks. And you've got Finn Balor kind of fits in with the Beastman motif too, but I think Braun really fits that perfectly. The Roman Reigns figure, he's matched up with Fisto, which makes perfect sense because the Superman punch, and Fisto's the guy with the big fist, obviously. And the Roman Reigns figure, I think, looks amazing. I'm like, oh my god, am I going to be tempted to actually buy a Roman Reigns figure just because it looks so awesome? So he fits this perfectly. John Cena, they're doing a second one because he did a He-Man figure with him. They're also doing a Faker figure. Faker was basically a blue, evil He-Man. They didn't try too hard with that toy back in the day, but he's like a blue He-Man with like a repainted Skeletor's armor, and he's like an evil He-Man. He's like Bizarro, basically. So they're doing a John Cena Faker toy that's like, the He-Man Cena figure is more in the style of like the never give up, stupid babyface Cena, and the Faker toy is more in line with the Thug Life John Cena. So, which is strangely appropriate because it's like, yeah, you're a faker. Yeah, you come from the mean streets of Boston, Massachusetts. Fuck you. Like what was it? West Newbury, Massachusetts. It's like, yeah, right. Yeah, real street thug you are. But yeah, I got really brainstorming on this and things. Oh, another figure that I saw artwork for that was amazing. Undertaker mixed with Scareglow. Scareglow was one of the last figures released of the original He-Man line, and he's a glow-in-the-dark skeleton that they listed as the evil ghost of Skeletor. And it's like this glow-in-the-dark toy. It looks awesome. It's one of the cooler-looking toys in the original line. And they gave that to Undertaker. I'm like, that matchup is so fucking perfect. Wow, that looks cool. And, obviously, because I nerd out over this shit, and I love He-Man and all this, and I love wrestling and everything, my mind started racing on all these other different things they could do. Obviously, they could get the women involved, because we do have female characters in the line. These are the three that, I have four. I already showed you Shadow Weaver, but we've got these three right here. We got Teela and Evil Lynn, who are like the two original females. We have She-Ra, which is the show-accurate She-Ra that was never released in the original line. But I always wanted like a master-style She-Ra toy, and now I have one. There was also a toy of the Sorceress, who has the big falcon headdress and everything. And immediately my mind started racing. I'm like, okay, who could be Evil Lynn? Who could be Teela? Who could be She-Ra? Who could be the Sorceress? I feel like Charlotte would make a great She-Ra or the Sorceress if they want to go that. I think she would look good in the falcon headdress and everything, but she would also look good as like the Battle Warrior She-Ra toy. Becky Lynch is obviously Teela. I mean, the red hair, it writes itself. Becky Lynch is obviously Teela. And Evil Lynn, I was thinking maybe Sasha Banks, maybe Stephanie McMahon, if they wanted to go that route, design her to look like Evil Lynn. But Sasha Banks was the first one that popped into my head for Evil Lynn. And then there's also some of the other figures. This was one of my favorites from the original line, Trapjaw. And again, this is the more show-accurate version, but Trapjaw was one of my favorites from the original line. I think it's one of the coolest toys. I'm like, okay, who could be the cyborg with the metal mouth and the gun arm attached to it? And I'm like, Goldberg. Goldberg would look awesome as a fucking cyborg. It's like, all right, make Goldberg the Trapjaw toy. And my mind started, I was like, okay, you got to get the Snake Man in there somehow. Okay, Jake the Snake Roberts would make a great King Hiss. King Hiss was the figure where it's like he looks like a normal man, but then you take the you remove the shielding around his body, and he turns into like a bunch of different snakes unleashed underneath the skin. And I'm like, all right, Jake Roberts would be perfect for that. You've got Randy Orton, who's the Viper, and like, okay, who would that be a good fit for? Like Cobra Khan, maybe, which was a toy that you squeeze its head and water, like a mist, comes out. You can do that, and obviously, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Texas Rattlesnake. There was a toy in the original line called Ratlore, and his gimmick was he could like stretch his neck out. You could also, if you shook him, he would rattle. I don't know if they want to put that in a Stone Cold Steve Austin toy, but go that far with it. But like molding him after a rattlesnake kind of writes itself. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there, and there's plenty of good things they could do. And it's so funny that they're doing this because about a year ago, a friend of mine, he was high as a kite, and I was just kind of indulging him as he ramble off on this. And we're both fans of He-Man. We're both fans of wrestling. And he said they should do WWE Masters of the Universe style shit. And the one that he fell in love with, that he came up with, was Big Boss Moss Man. So you get Big Boss Man, but he's also like Moss Man, so he's got like moss hanging off of him. And God, so many of the guys from the 80s would be perfect fits for this. It would be great. God, I'm trying to think of some other ones they could do that would be awesome. I'm trying to find a good one for Brock Lesnar and for Ric Flair. Like, who would they fit in with best? Maybe... Brock Lesnar could be Grizzlor, who's another member of the Horde, and he's like this... He's basically the Horde's equivalent to Beastman, where he's like... But the gimmick of that toy was that he had real hair, like real, like, fluffy hair on him. But they could make the Beast Incarnate Grizzlor, and they could play with that gimmick a little bit. They could also... Again, I can't think of a good one for Flair, though. Maybe just do a He-Man style thing with him, too. Maybe Prince Adam. I don't know. That might work for Rick. Do the Prince Adam gimmick. I don't know. Who the hell would be Orko, though? Do they want to do an Orko style figure? Who would that... Like, Hornswoggle would have been perfect for this. I don't mean to make a short joke, but... like, what goofy character could they get to be Orko? I can't even imagine anybody at this point that would be good for that. Now, Marco Stunt, if AEW was making these figures, he would be perfect as the Orko figure. But, so the sky's the limits with these Masters of the Universe. Another weird one that I came up with was Team Hell No, Kane and Daniel Bryan, the two partners that fought with each other all the time. One of the toys that they had back in the day was Too Bad. It was a two-headed figure. One half was blue, one half was purple. And the toy's arms were situated in a way where, like, the blue head's arm could punch the purple head, reach across and punch the purple head, and the purple head's arm could reach across and hit the blue head. And I don't think they designed it that way on purpose. I think it was just a happy accident, and every kid took advantage of it. And that would be great for Team Hell No. You've got a two-headed figure, Daniel Bryan and Kane, and they've got two arms, and they can punch the other head. It would be perfect. It would be absolutely perfect. For the love of God, let me come up with this shit, because it's like, I would have a fucking field day with this. I already have. I've had way more fun with this than I should have, but... In any case, yeah, I just wanted to come on here and geek out over these new toys that Mattel is releasing, because it's like, oh man, I wish these had come out when I was a kid, because they would have been great. And nowadays, it would be like, you know, I don't really have, like, they would make great display pieces, but I don't really have room for them. And if I had kids, though, I would get them in a heartbeat. It's like, you want to play wrestling with the Masters of the Universe? Well, have fun with that, but yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I'm really happy that WWE and Mattel got together and did something like this, because this is, again, Masters of the Universe is the greatest action figure toy line of all time, and the proof is in the fact that everybody is trying to, like, adapt their properties into Masters of the Universe now, and it's a perfect fit for everything. Everything looks better in the Masters of the Universe style. And it's funny, because Super 7, who did these figures... they also did, like, Star Wars style figures for a lot of different IPs. And they also included He-Man in that, like the old Kenner Star Wars figures. And I'm like, they don't look as good. They don't look as good in the Star Wars style. They look great in the He-Man style. And if you did Star Wars figures in the He-Man style, they would look amazing. But they don't look as good in the Kenner, 3.5-inch style or whatever that is. They just look better in the 5.5 He-Man style. It just looks better. They're great. They're fucking great. So I'm really happy. I really got to geek out over Mattel and WWE doing something like this. So for the kids that pick up these toys, have all the fun in the world, because you are living my dream and what I would have loved to have had at 6 and 7 years old. So yeah, just wanted to end the video with me geeking out over that. So that's all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. Link is down in the description below. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below. Hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post my new videos. But that is all I have for you now. Thank God, phew, I made it. I knew this video was going to be long, but it was well worth it, because I had a blast talking about some of this stuff. But that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all later.